And we, quite frankly, have too few Democrats who really understand what it takes to grow businesses. And I'm here tonight to say to you that just like in that 1 year in 2012, 2013, when we abolished the death penalty, we passed marriage equality, we passed the DREAM Act while expanding voting rights and passing sensible gun safety reform. My conversation started out with the leaders in the state capitol telling me I was way too ambitious. There was no way that that could happen. One of them would be audacious. All of them was insane. And we got them all done. We will get this done the same way. And this is how we got that done, and this is how we'll get this done. See, they told us to get in line, and we went back to the young activists, and we said, this is what they're telling us. They're telling us we're too audacious, we're too bold, we can't solve all these problems all at once. And the young activists said to us, wait, hold on, explain something to us. All these big civil rights goals that year, you want us to believe that we can defend minority rights with majority votes in the state capitol. But you're telling us to practice subtraction or division by telling this group not to push forward or that group not to push forward. Explain one thing to us, please. How does that add up? So why don't we try this new math they taught us millennials? It's called addition and multiplication. And just say all for one and one for all. And a sign went up. To abolish the death penalty. Let me be clear, abolishing the death penalty was first made a goal in Maryland by Frederick Douglass. Pass marriage equality, pass the DREAM Act. One side. And that became our movement, and we got them all done. We will, when I'm governor, have big years, big progress on the economy and on education the exact same way. We'll pull people together, build a bigger, more robust coalition. We'll adopt the motto of Three Musketeers, say all for one, one for all. And we'll go get it done. And if you look at my campaign, you'll see that we are doing that right now. We have more endorsements than anybody in this race. And we have more donations from Marylanders than anybody in this race. And we have more low-dollar donations than every candidate combined, including Governor Hogan. And, yes, it's not a low-dollar donation. That's a debt to Satan. And we've been endorsed by Bernie Sanders and Cory Booker. That's what it looks like when you build big, robust coalitions. It's what I did at the NAACP. It's what we're doing in this campaign. It's what I'll do as your governor. With your support, we can win. Thank you. God bless you. Happy to have questions. Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Jealous, it's good to see you again.
Please call me back.
My apologies for being late, but we were actually on a conference called Planning the Gubernatorial Candidate Forum. We have all of the candidates come to Charles County, hosted by the Charles County Democratic Central Committee. So very much looking forward to that.
Oh, if I was with the Charles County Dems last year, I look forward to coming back.
Absolutely, that's right. And so my question is, I just heard that President Obama and A.G. Holder were planning to be extremely actively involved in local elections this coming cycle.
Sure.
Have you heard from
him? The president will be staying out of primaries. The president will be involved in the general, and I think that's typically what most presidents do. But we have right now 3 of the Democrats that people anticipate will be running for president have endorsed our campaign. Booker, Bernie, and then on the West Coast, the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, who seeking to be both the first Jewish and Latino president of the United States, is helping us raise out there. And before this season's over, we should have one more. And one thing that we're demonstrating in doing that is we'll be able to raise to take on Hogan. Because when you have a low-dollar army across the state and across the country, as we do, and you have the help of leaders in our party all around the country, that's the way you beat the Koch brothers. I beat the Koch brothers before, by the way. Back in 2012, they sought to make sure Obama did not get re-elected. I ran the largest nonpartisan, unlikely voter operation in the country. We turned out 1.4 million unlikely voters. I'm the only candidate in this race that knows how to keep the Koch brothers. When the AP called me and said, how'd you all do this? Van Jones have been praising us all on CNN, calling us the unlikely heroes of Obama's re-election. AP called. I had 5 words. Was thank God for the Koch brothers. Because they're so greedy, they're so aggressive, that they end up, like Trump is going to be our best organizer in many ways. They get you to inspire your base. They attacked voting rights, we turned out voters. They back Hogan, we'll turn out voters to defeat Hogan and them.
Hi everyone, my name is Colin Foster and I have a question for Ben.
Yeah.
I'm from St. Mary's County and I'm actively working with the delegates. I'm actively working with Julia Nichols and Brian Crosby and Tom Berger, who are running against the Republican incumbents.
Yeah.
They're primarily focused on trying to diversify our economy, and as a kid who has parents who work for the Department of Defense,
Yeah.
literally the only jobs that are pretty much available in St. Mary's County are contracting jobs for the DoD.
Yeah.
And that and minimum wage, low-paying jobs with no benefits. How do we diversify such a small rural community and try to bring code jobs here, and how do we advance our tech centers on a local level when our commissioners are a little too reluctant to give us money?
Yeah. Well, one thing, and we're working on this plan now, we have to have universal broadband across the entire state. In our rural areas, it'll be a huge boom. I mean, right now, in Baltimore, 40% of Baltimore doesn't have broadband. The Eastern Shore, you can imagine. Southern Maryland, Western Maryland, there are just huge spots where we don't have broadband coverage. You put that there, and now entrepreneurs can help build that economy. You unleash a lot. So that's one. 2, we've got to take a smart approach to transportation in rural areas. In our country, you use on-demand technologies for privately owned companies like Uber and Via and Lyft. Via's a van, it's like an Uber van. And then public transportation uses like 1970s technologies. Well, Larry Hogan would prefer to live in the 1970s when it comes to transportation, and for that matter, criminal justice policy, trying to bring back the failed war on drugs. There's an opportunity in rural areas to bring on-demand technology into public transportation, union-operated public transportation, so that those young people, for instance, so like when I was young, even in Suitland, we had issues just getting me to my job in DC, so that young people can get to their jobs. I talked to too many young people in rural counties. I got a job, and then I couldn't get to it. And then you try to look at a map and say, how do we make public transportation work? And there's no straight line that makes it work. But if you have a public van that can go point to point when somebody's calling you on their cell phone, then it starts to work. So those are 2 of the things. Other things, by expanding our health system, because when you're in rural counties, typically the hospital and the specialists around it are a big driver for that county. If you let Trump and Hogan get rid of the ACA, those rural hospitals, many of them will implode. It's what's happening in Oklahoma right now. But if you expand healthcare for all, then it grows. So those are 3 ways: transportation, broadband, and growing the local health-based economy. Last thing I'll say, if you look at our state farm board, it's more likely you'll find a representative of the pesticide industry than a representative of small farms. And we also need to figure out how we lift up and encourage the folks your age to get into farming, because there's a lot of folks who are trying, and we can make it easy. Sure. Please.
So about universal broadband, also for St. Mary's County, we have one ISP to choose from, and that's MetroCast. And if you go to look at their prices, it's like $70 a month. You don't even get 100 megabits per second. I did a research paper for English class about net neutrality. I realized that the Census Bureau did some data about access to internet. 10% of America has access to more than 2 choices that have 100 megabits per second. And currently our delegates aren't in favor of net neutrality.
And you're saying that you only have 100 per minute.
We don't have 100 megabits for homes, we have for businesses.
Yeah.
And it's expensive.
Yes. No. Well, that's big supporter of net neutrality, and just like in New York State, the governor took action. We'll take action here.
How you doing, Mr. Jefferson?
I'm doing well, thank you.
My name is Derek Terry, and it's always a pleasure to run into somebody from the Baltimore area. I started teaching at Lake Clifton, went to Edgewood. My wife's a city grad, all her family. So I definitely would say that.
City grads are as proud as Western grads. It's kind of crazy.
The question I have is, I recently retired from the military reserves after 28 years of service. And
brother, you look like you're 38 years old, so I'm sorry that you were a child soldier.
I don't stress myself over things I have no control over. That's right. But the question I have, I hear a lot of politicians will talk about how much they appreciate the veterans, what they want to do for the veterans. And as a reservist, I don't get my retirement check until I guess I'm 58 or 55. And I know Charles County, I'm just guessing, it may be 40% veterans.
Yeah.
And out of the 40% veterans that I speak with, probably 80% of them will not retire in Maryland.
Right.
Because there is nothing that the state of Maryland is doing to attract them to stay there. I look at states like Florida, you know, I guess the question I'm asking is, what is it that you will do as governor to try to keep veterans here as far as with some incentives? All the incentives I've really seen for me is a discount in the store.
Yeah.
The VA loan, that has nothing to do with the state, has nothing to do with the county, so there's nothing that they can say, hey, this is what we do. And I think the only thing I recall that was passed at the State House was something in reference to a tax credit or something, but you had to be 65 years of age and lived in a house for 30 years. That's not going to happen for me.
Sure.
So the question is, what is it that you would do to try to keep veterans like myself, who actually want to stay here, but basically my retirement money will
We'll go much further somewhere else.
Down south. It's like
North Carolina, for example. Yeah, no, that's an issue that we're looking into. I'm very sympathetic. I'm not sympathetic to every group. Like for instance, hedge fund managers who pay a lower effective tax rate than their executive assistants, right? But our veterans, when it comes to issues of retirement, we absolutely have to look into. These are folks who are pillars of our community. My campaign manager is a former active duty U.S. Marine. He's president of the NAACP. Our 1,200 branches are disproportionately run by retired vet volunteers. I know just how valuable folks like yourself are to making a community run well. And so we are looking into it. I'm sympathetic, and I believe there are ways to offset those dollars. And hedge fund managers are top of my list. There's a broader conversation though around vets that we also need to be having. Too many who are dying from this epidemic of heroin and pills. One of my campaign manager's buddies killed himself with opioids not long ago. Our legislator recommended that we have 10 crisis centers. Our governor gave us 1. When I'm governor, we'll have 10. We'll have them all across the state. We'll have crisis response teams in every county. In Baltimore, we'll stop rationing the life-saving drug naloxone. We got more people dying of opioid and heroin overdoses in Baltimore than of shootings. We don't need to be playing games where the doctors say we need more naloxone. Give them the naloxone. We have a lot of vets who, for one reason or the other, aren't getting to the VA for their health care, for their mental health care. They could be homeless. Covering everybody with health care also means mental health care for all. And we have a responsibility to all of our citizens, especially to those who have served. Creating a stronger safety net will benefit, and I'd say probably disproportionate. We have a responsibility to the families of those who are serving. We have too many young sailors and soldiers and Marines whose families have to rely, and I think it's a place of national shame, on public assistance, even while their loved ones serving. We have to make sure that our schools are top-notch for all of our kids, especially for kids who have one parent who's dealing with everything, while the other parent's serving overseas. And so, there are targeted concerns that we're, and then when it comes to employment, our state could be doing more, quite frankly, to help people transition from the military into great careers and to launch small businesses. When I talk about putting the state on the side of small businesses, again, it's disproportionately, frankly, help support folks like yourself. Lots of entrepreneurs across our state, specifically our state, retired from federal jobs, typically military, and then started their business. So, yes, on the specific issue of retirement, we're looking into it. I'm sympathetic. I think there are ways to balance, to offset. But we're also, frankly, focused on building a stronger state when it comes to education and healthcare and supporting small businesses that I believe will be of disproportionate relevance to the vet community and to the families of those who are active duty right now. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Dick, and I heard you down in Annapolis when you spoke in favor of the fracking ban.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, you can sign me up for shutting down the pipeline they want to build under the Potomac. And you can sign me up for convening all of the governors for every state that benefits in the Chesapeake Bay to make sure that Chesapeake Bay restoration continues, even if Pruitt guts it as he plans to do.
Well, it's just horrifying. Unfortunately, in Charles County, you're being very threatened right now by the largest compressor station that on the East Coast here.
Go for it.
No, but it is to facilitate the exit of the frack gas through Maryland to Cove Point,
Gotcha.
to India and China. And it is so threatening because
Of air quality?
air quality, and our health.
Yes.
And it's a whole area of Charles County that's present pristine is to get this compressor station.
This is Sydney
24,000
Snow on my campaign for Beacon Hills Politics for us. Please get her the information.
I will, yes, but what I'm concerned about is that the Cove Point is proceeding without any safety study.
Yes.
And we would also like a safety study
Yes.
for the.
This has to get much easier in our state. Clean air, clean water issues, citizens have an absolute right to know what they're breathing, what they're drinking. And in kind of more rural areas, it can be shocking when you dig into it. And I live in Pasadena, Maryland. I'm on a well. I move into the house, I get a test. They tell me my water's cleaner than city water. I'm blessed. I said, did you check for radium? They said, oh no, that's a few $100 more. I said, well, by all means, here's a few $100. Tell them what's going on with the radium. They said, my gosh, we don't know why your water doesn't glow. So I got a whole expensive system that pulled all the radium out of it, fine. Then I start talking to my neighbors, and they say, well, you moved into an area, we've been dealing with cancer around here for a long time. And then you find in rural areas wherever you go, there's these cancer clusters across Maryland. Now, I don't pretend to know what's driving them, but I do know that radium's on the list of possible things that could be it. And when I talk to the well water people, they say, yeah, we know that this area has a cluster of radium wells. But the residents often don't know. Then you're out on the eastern shore and these big poultry, and then you talk to the residents who live amidst them, and say, we have a cancer cluster, and we don't know what we're breathing. So whether it's Cove Point, or whether it's the facility here, or whether it's my neighbors, or whether it's folks on the eastern shore, we will make sure that right to know around air and water gets easier and easier in this state. Because right now, it is literally endangering too many of our neighbors, and they literally have a right to know.
This is called the Charles Compressor Station.
Yeah.
And it is such a threat because of the air quality issue and the possibility of an explosion. And the pipeline goes all through Charles County. And now we know that it's the only pipeline to Cove Point.
Yeah.
So billions of dollars worth of frac gas
Yeah.
travel, we will be facilitating that.
Yeah.
So I want you to put along with the Potomac pipeline,
Yes.
the Charles Station, Compressor Station.
Get us the information. Let us
Yeah,
let us look
I
into
will,
it.
but.
But on issues like the one at issue in Cove Point, that's part of the issue here. Sign me up for making sure people know what's in the air, what's in the water. At the very least, the safety
And
things have to be.
safety
Yes.
studies that Hogan has not,
Yes.
has refused to request.
Yes.
Same thing for the community housing.
No, and that's look, the only monopoly that our democracy is supposed to be tolerant of is government, and that's only because we control it, right? It's the monopoly we create together, and it's accountable to us. When government stops being accountable to the people, it is very dangerous.
And we have
And
that
that's what
case
you're-
now.
yeah, and that's what you're dealing with, so
FERC
I get
is
it.
just totally out of control.
Yeah, I get it.
And Public Service Commission also. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My question is, for Southern Maryland,
Yes.
they never really respect Charles County, St. Mary's County, or Carver. We pay our good taxes. Once you get in Waldorf, you leave, White Plains are stores on both sides of the street. So there's taxes and money here. My question is, you hear in Montgomery County, they build the internet. I don't drive up there, so I really don't care. And they got other programs, PG. My question is, the taxes that we pay here in Charles County, can you say that we will get our share of fair, new development?
We absolutely have to look at doing development differently. And in part because our population is moving. And part of what you're talking about is catching development up with where the population is moving. This is one, and so, yes. My first concern, as you heard me talk about, is to make sure, because last time I was in Charles County, I was with parents who were talking about overcrowding issues in certain schools, is to make sure that Charles County gets all the money it needs for education. That's job one. And on the issue of development, we've got to shift to a much smarter way that envisions people creating jobs here and living near where we're creating jobs here. And making sure that we have the infrastructure for that is the government's job, whether it's transportation, whether it's making sure that we have the highest speed, like gigabyte internet, terabytes, or whether it's ensuring, quite frankly, that we're incentivizing developers who will build in a way that most benefits the community as a whole. One of the mistakes we make throughout the state is when a county or the state has a clean patch of land, we basically prioritize the developer who will put the most rich people in. And if you look historically the way cities have been built well in our country and around the world, that's precisely the wrong way to approach it. You have to ask, what's the biggest value for the residents who are there? What's the biggest value for that county folks who are there? And that leads you in a different place. And by the way, you can build profitable developments that have everybody in mind. It's kind of capitalism 101. You can sell a few rich people, something at a very high price, or you can sell everybody else something at an affordable price, and you'll make money either way. And so we don't have to do development the way it's been done. We can do it in a more inclusive way that affirms the people who are here and meets their needs. The other thing I would say, kind of on that point, is we've got to break down, the old boys network that controls development, that controls who gets contracts. They're across our state. There's a transactionalism and a calcification that keeps money kind of flowing to one set of players and locks everybody else out. And we've got to stop that. It's not, at the end of the day, it's not good for our economy to keep privileging folks while locking out other entrepreneurs. We've seen it on full display with the whole medical cannabis issue. But quite frankly, when you just look into government vending generally, it's all throughout it. One of the things I'm proud of is that 99% of my donors are individuals. Why is that important? Because there's other folks in this race. Half of their donors are companies. 30% are companies. I'm a business person, I'll tell you something. If I give you money as an individual, it could just be because I like you. But if my business gives you money, it's because we're expecting a return. That, ending that transactionalism will actually make our economy grow faster, because then it will be closer to being a meritocracy than what we have right now, which is not that. Okay, sorry, she's in charge. What about you?
Yes, hi everyone. Couldn't think of anything to say when you first asked me, but a little listening on just some of my concerns. Okay, first of all, I would just like to say thank you for what you did about the death penalty. Okay, so speaking on that, I want to speak to you on the penal system.
Yes.
I'm not really asking questions, I'm just giving you concerns. What I noticed with it is the recidivism.
Yes.
Everyone seems like they return.
Yes.
It's like the system is broken.
Yes.
You know, I have a young man that's coming out this year.
Yes.
Had been in for 7 years. I know part of it is on him, but this young man does not have anything. He did not
Yes.
receive a GED
Yes.
while he was in there or anything.
How long has it been there?
7 years. And in the last year, he hasn't even had a job.
And is he at all better educated now than he was when he went in? Is he
I
all
would
better
say
compared
no.
to? Yeah. Right.
So,
Yep.
here's the thing, he's on his way out.
Yep.
Okay, number one, he isn't equipped to do anything,
Amen.
okay?
So what you're saying is you'd like to see corrections actually
And
happen in the Department
mainly
of
also, for instance, when they do come out, they really can't go out and look for a job because then they're on probation.
Set them right back to where we're in.
So I just want, to bring that out to you as something I hope that you all, well, I know
Sure.
you all with
May I talk to you about it?
NAACP. Sure, I have 3 more things, okay.
All right. I'll leave it to the chairman with me. Well, let's do this one and then let's do all the other 3 as a group. Okay. So, Department of Corrections. The whole point is for you to come back to us more whole, more prepared to be a contributing member of society, less likely to be violent or dangerous, or otherwise make a bad decision that undermines the strength and health of our community. I've spent a lot of my life, 25 years to be exact, in the criminal justice reform movement, one way or the other, playing different roles. And we have a lot of work to do here in Maryland. One, we have to take on adult illiteracy wherever it flourishes, and it flourishes most unabated in our prisons. If somebody goes in illiterate, they are likely, almost to a certainty, to come out just as illiterate. There are facilities where 75% of the inmates are too illiterate to read a McDonald's application in our country, and Maryland's no different. It's part of our country. And if you can't read a McDonald's menu, guess what? You can't work there either. So we will make sure that we take on adult illiteracy head on in our jails and prisons, and that is part of a bigger shift to make sure that we're training people so they can come out. Why? Because it's in the interest of our safety. And we're already spending a lot of money while they're there, so incrementally it's not that much more to make sure that they come back to us better. That's one. 2, we will eliminate all the barriers that still exist. We can go further and ban the box than we've gone, and we will. And so making sure that private employers are not discriminating against formerly incarcerated people in ways that are irrational and often tied to racial discrimination and class-based discrimination at the laws. But more than anything, we will catch up with Georgia and Texas, and it's certainly a place of state shame.
Amen.
That we let our legislators tell us they were doing justice reinvestment and shrinking our prison system. And you know what they signed us up to? Shrinking it by 5% in 10 years. Georgia and Texas and California are all, say, in the last 3-4 years, have reduced their prison system more like 20-30% in 3-4 years. Texas has shut down 8 prisons. When was Maryland supposed to lag behind Georgia and Texas?
Yeah.
What?
Exactly.
And and let's not pretend, any of us. I say this as a guy who's on one side of my family, my mom's family, just comes off of plantations in Virginia. The other side of the family, my dad's family, well, he was disowned by a very wealthy family in New England that's been here since 1624 and married my mom. And I look across that family, as fractured as it is, and every person under 50 is clearly paying a price for mass incarceration. And let me explain to you how. So I say to the president of Penn State once, we're at a conference, what's your biggest challenge? She says, oh, it's like Groundhog Day every year. Every year I go up to the state capitol to keep so much more money from going to the state pen. So just a little more comes to Penn State. Turns out, and there's a report on the NAACP website I commissioned when I was president, you can go look at it, called Misplaced Priorities. State after state after state after state across our country, spending, starting about 1970, on higher education went up. Spending on higher and higher incarceration went up. Spending on public higher education went down. Spending on higher incarceration went up. Spending on higher education went down. As spending on higher education went down, public university tuition rates went up. As public university tuition rates went up, private university tuition rates went up. Because they'll never be outcharged by the public one. It's permission to charge more. And as they did that, students' debts went up, student defaults went up. And you know what went down? New business starts. The last 30 years, as mass incarceration has taken off, student debt crisis has taken off, every decade the last 30 years, fewer and fewer American young people are starting new businesses because they're layered in debt. And so, we will roll out a plan for ultimately making our public universities debt-free across the state. And let me tell you what that does for a family. Here are the reference. My mom, my grandparents lived in the Pella Homes housing projects in West Baltimore for 8 years. And they moved to Pulaski Street, which is a slight upgrade, but not a whole lot. What ultimately got my family kind of headed firmly towards the American dream was my grandfather went to the University of Maryland School of Law for 1 year, the third class of black students admitted to the university. It cost $200. It allowed him to become a probation officer. It put the second union job in our household, which allowed the family to do much better and stabilize. By 1970, that tuition at the University of Maryland School of Law was $400. Today, if it kept up with inflation, as it basically did between the late 1950s and 1970, it'd be $2,600. It's $31,000. That's what we're doing to our young people. I've talked to one of the most successful businessmen in the state. He's now in his 80s. He was there when my granddad was there. But not, 10 years later. And no, it's at the same time because my granddad was 40 because of segregation. So he was there at the same time as my granddad. And he's built a massive empire. But he said, Ben, if I had come out of the equivalent of $100,000 in debt, I never would have started my business. And that business creates thousands and thousands of jobs across our state. So we've got to stop short-circuiting our young entrepreneurs. And that's why I'm totally committed to ending our student debt crisis and ending mass incarceration to help pay for it.
Hi, my name is Ryan Marone, and I had a question about your thoughts on specific issues with domestic violence and gun control.
Yes.
I'm sure everyone in here knows we very recently had a horrible case where a mom in White Plains did what she was supposed to do, and she got a temporary restraining order, and she specifically told them about her husband's weapons. but because it was only a temporary order, they did not seize them, and I'm sure they were just following, the law that was in
Yes.
place. It's my understanding that when it becomes a permanent order, then they would have the option of taking his guns, and within 24 hours, he murdered her in their home with their 3 young children in the house. Unacceptable.
Totally unacceptable.
How can we fix that? What are your thoughts on that?
We need to, there's like multiple things, right? One is we have to change the culture at our police departments. And we have to do that with an eye towards this very issue of domestic violence, because it's right at the center of a culture that's not doing a good enough job taking care of crime victims. It's the crime victims, if you will, who are most layered under the types of biases that we need to get out of our police departments if we're all going to be safe. 2, we need to look at all, we have pretty tough gun laws here, but obviously there are big problems, and we got to close those loopholes so that the police are mandated to get those guns out. If there's a temporary restraining order, that's enough. I get due process, but you know what? If you go through the courts and it turns out that it wasn't right, you'll get your guns back. It's not the end of the world. When mom's dead, it actually is the end of the world. We have to make sure that we're funding domestic violence services sufficiently across the state. I've been to a lot of communities where it's just not. And it's a real problem. We also have to make sure that we're engaging the men. This is what my father's done for 30 years. When I was a kid, my mom was very active in what we call the battered women's. When I get really tired, I stutter. I had 2 hours of sleep last night. But anyways, in the battered women's sort of like protection community, and our house was a portal on this where women could come, and my mom would drive them to a safe house. And my dad was running the local volunteer center, and he got a call, and he said that from the domestic violence hotline that he supported, and that my mom was very active in it. And they said, Fred, we keep getting these calls from men, and they're not being abused as some men are, for instance, in gay relationships, or even sometimes occasionally by women. I said, no, these aren't those men. No, we're getting calls from men who are abusive, and they're repeatedly abusive. Some of them have called here about different women, mentioning different women over a period of years. And we have nobody to deal with it. And my father started doing basically group counseling with them. And in a year, he had to shut down the program, because he had men in there who had confessed to being serial murderers and killed multiple girlfriends, serial rapists. And some of them had just killed one person. And it was too much for him as one person to take on. And so what he did is he took a year and he trained 20 other men. And then they restarted the program, formerly called Men's Alternatives to Violence. The courts would refer and support. And what they ended up figuring out and teaching those men was how to build self-sustaining support networks with other men who are committed to living a life beyond violence, beyond domestic violence. It's the only thing that works. Because otherwise, you do a little bit of engagement with them, and you send them right back into a friendship network that actually affirms the need to beat up women. My dad, white male ally of both the Black Civil Rights Movement and the feminist movement. And what he taught me, what they used to call the men's pro-feminist movement, he was a leader in California. What he taught me, just through his life, is it takes white people to help in racism, and it takes men to help in all forms of patriarchy. And you can count on me to be an ally. So we will make sure that guns get out of the household of men who are accused of domestic violence, get to if there is any restraining order. But we will go much further to help make sure that the women are safe and supported and have what they need to get on with their lives, and also to help try to break the cycle of violence with those men. Because otherwise, and we just saw it in the national news with Mr. Porter.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how old is the guy? And he has 2 ex-wives who are accusing him of beating them up. So you've got to, also be focused on those men, and there are things we can do as hopeless as NBC in that moment.
We have a question there.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, actually, so I was gonna ask, I'm a college age student, I'm actually.
We can tell.
I go to the College of Southern Maryland down in La Plata.
Okay.
And I actually transferred there recently, from Salisbury University State Institution.
Yep.
Because their CSM was much more affordable for me. And
Yep.
I was wondering, do you have any specific plans that are going to be coming out in the coming weeks about affordability? Because I actually did,
Yes.
I did 2 terms in the AmeriCorps. I earned about almost over $12,000 in a scholarship, and that only covered me for 1 semester at
Yeah.
a state institution. So,
Yeah.
and also kind of rolling into the AmeriCorps piece, I was reading Delegate Mazir's blog that he has recently. He actually had an idea of creating a program that would actually help make college affordable, while also trying to get young people involved in communities in Maryland. So I wanted your thoughts on that.
Yes. So that will be rolled out for Easter. We are working on it right now. We will make sure that our community, Delegate Pinsky's bill that's moving right now is a good place to start. Make sure that our community colleges are free for most folks in Maryland, tuition free for most folks in Maryland. As we do that, actually we'll begin building on the successful pilot programs in multiple places across the state, creating more dual credit classes in high school. So if you have younger siblings, they come out with college credits, right? So they won't have to pay, for 4 years of education. It could be 3, it could be 2. We will build on what New York has done by essentially raising the income threshold for the Pell Grant to create more college affordability for families that are deeper into the middle class, but still no one can afford all that debt. And ultimately, we will reverse engineer what's happened in Maryland since the growth of mass incarceration that I talked about earlier, which is true justice reinvestment, where you actually right-size your prison system. Our prison system, when I'm governor, we will put more killers in. We'll put more rapists in. We will get law enforcement. I'm a trained criminologist. I teach criminal justice policy at Princeton every Monday. And we will get our law enforcement priorities right. In Prince George's County, violence is going down, but shootings are going up. And the young people who are coming in have more bullet holes in their bodies because we have extended clips that are proliferating throughout the county. I was just getting briefed on that the other day. I have a family member who was shot in Prince George's County less than 10 years ago, and another was shot in Howard County. So I'm quite aware, that, and so we will get more killers in jail by actually beefing up our homicide units, get more rapists in jail by beefing up our special victims units, but we will have less people in jail because we'll stop using prisons as warehouses for addicts. And we'll start saying addicts and do that. And when you do that, you'll actually be safer and saving money at the same time. And as we do that, as we go down the way Georgia has gone down, the way Texas has gone down, the way California is going down, we will send the money back into our public university system where it should have been in the first place. And so you see 2 big steps right away towards making our colleges more affordable. Starting with our community colleges, and then starting with making them more affordable for families that are solidly in the middle class. But then what you'll see is every year, we will be spending less and less on incarceration and investing more and more in higher education. And in other words, we can't undo in a day or a year what's been done in the last 40 years, but we can absolutely get our priorities right and get headed back towards a system that's truly affordable.
I'm going to take 2 more questions. This lady in the back, Colin, I love you. This lady back here, ma'am.
Hello. I have a question, and I may have came a little bit late, but I wanted to know, we talk about training for education, and I guess maybe prevention too, because we see where all over Maryland they have been having abuse problems, sexual abuse, and, you know, it hasn't, I don't know how much it's been resolved, even down here in Charles County, it has happened, so, you know, training, plus how do you make sure that people who should not be in the school system are not in the school system, and also even over in Baltimore where they have infrastructure problems in the city schools, and from what I understand, the governor isn't that concerned with that where children are sitting in 43-degree schools. You know, as governor, what is your plan?
All right, so you want to talk about schools and the heaters in Baltimore. And again, I had 2 hours of sleep last night. So I'm going to start with that one, and you're going to remind me the other two, okay? On that issue, there's actually a really good fix. But we have to shift our mindset. The current mindset is Baltimore City is a quote-unquote poor school district. And therefore, all Baltimore City can afford to do is to fix what it's got. And what it's got is a bunch of boilers whose average age is way over 30 years old. I'd be surprised if there's one boiler that was under 30 years. Why is that important? Because when a boiler is more than 30 years old, it is so expensive to operate that you can buy a brand new, state-of-the-art, environmentally efficient heating system for that building and pay it off in less than 3 years just with the reduced monthly power costs. So you wouldn't actually have to spend a whole bunch of money. You can finance it internally, you can finance it externally, but the bottom line is just like you can pay off a solar panel on your roof with lower power bills, you can do that, but with a boiler it is much faster than buying that solar panel. And student attendance we would expect to go up. Why? Because those boilers are producing smog that's recirculated through that building and triggers every person in the building who has asthma. What were the other 2 points?
The other 2 were just having some kind of training for teachers or some way to make sure that you don't have people in schools
who are sexual predators.
Be in schools.
Yes. And going back to your neighbor over here who asked about domestic violence, one of the tech fixes that we have to get is to make sure that anybody who has a temporary restraining order has a way to be digitally notified if that person is close to them. And you can do that by basically tying all their IPs through the court system so that if people are sort of, it's kind of, there are ways to get around it, but it's proven to be very effective where they piloted it, to just let people know, because you can be at the mall, you don't know. You know what I'm saying? Who you're going to walk into. When it comes to sexual predators in our schools, we absolutely, this is something that is close to my heart. My grandmother was a state social worker in Maryland for 30 years. She helped train Barbara Mikulski when she was a young social worker. She led a crusade against the sexual exploitation of Baltimore's most vulnerable children in the 1950s. And yet, whether it's sex trafficking or sexual predators in our schools, our kids are still way too vulnerable. And quite frankly, some of the predators in the schools are gangs that force girls into sexual trafficking. We have to, all of these things actually start with having effective sex education in our schools. We have to be having real conversations about what's happening in young people's lives so they have the best information. That's to take nothing away from the responsibilities of parents. I'm a father of a 12-year-old girl. You better believe we have those conversations like 3 days a week. And my ex and I have joint custody, so then we're going to be 4 days a week. So basically every day she's with dad, we're having some conversation to make sure that she's safe out there in the world and she knows what to do if somebody tries to make her less safe. On the issue of sexual predators in the schools, if you have good education, now kids have a vocabulary for what's going on, and they're having conversations with other authority figures in the school who are telling them this is what you do if. These are the warning signs if. And now you've just stoked a much healthier conversation that's more productive for routing out the sexual predators in the school. 2, there should be, because this is effective in all sorts of other institutions, just like you see at many colleges, on every like bathroom stall, place where often folks go to hide when they've been traumatized, a poster that just says, this is what you do if, this is who you call if. That should be everywhere. And then we have to make sure, when it comes to public servants who are fired for doing bad things to citizens, and that's whether it's police officers who have killed somebody, or it's a teacher who's touched a student, that we have a database that empowers our counties not to hire them somewhere else in the state. And then we share that information with other states.
Last question here.
Last question, I should make it a good one, but my name is John Mitchell. I'm one of the members of the Greater Progressive Activists in Southern Georgia.
Look forward to talking to you also.
Very good. Looking forward to it. And my question was essentially going to be what Sister you already asked in terms of your vision on the criminal injustice system.
Yeah.
Wanted to take it just a little bit further.
Sure.
I was reminded how Gandhi had once said, when you find a thief in your community, don't call the police. Invite the thief into your home and have dinner with him.
Restorative justice.
I'm sorry?
I said restorative justice.
Yes,
and illustration of restorative justice.
It's a little hard for us to do, as a community, when we're passing laws. You can't pass a law to force me to take someone in the home, but we tend to ostracize folks that we put in prison.
Yes.
And as we've seen, what used to be a crime pertaining to marijuana now is perfectly legal money-making business opportunity.
Right. In Canada, Colorado, Washington State, coming to a state near you, and when I'm governor, coming to the state.
Very good. Yet, it goes to show that some of the people in prison can actually help inform us on what our laws should be.
Yes.
And when it comes to prison reform, I can't understand any reason to take away the right to vote of a human being simply because you're incarcerated.
Right.
They know better than we. They can advise us on how to improve that system.
Yes.
They can advise us on how we can build a better path to
and the more integrated they are into society, the less of a danger they will be to a community. Right. So what's the question there? Because I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
I guess that was the question, whether you're willing to push that a little further to fully integrate our incarcerated community into the unincarcerated community as fully participating citizens. There's no reason they shouldn't be able to vote.
I was the first NAACP president to go to the Maine state, go to the state of Maine in 45 years. And the only one to go to the Maine state prison. I went to the Maine state prison because of 1,000 inmates, 900 of whom were white, 200 had joined the NAACP. And they were trying to cut the organization down to 50 people, which would have made it basically a black organization when more than 100 of our members were white. And while I was there, they were doing a candidates forum in the prison. And the only person who showed up was a Republican. And you may say, why is that? Well, I told you. Out of 1,000 inmates in the Maine state prison, 900 were white. And working class. And they tend to vote Republican. And in Maine and Vermont, every inmate can vote. Every inmate can vote. And in most of Western Europe, every inmate can vote. Our country, the exclusion of formerly incarcerated people, people of felons, see it in Virginia quite clearly, it was a lifetime ban if you get a felony, is very tied to the ways that we sought to perpetuate patterns established during slavery, after slavery. So in Virginia, for example, they elevated misdemeanors to felonies, and then said if you've been connected, and those misdemeanors were associated with poverty, like stealing a hog, after the end of slavery, and then they very quickly said, and if you are a felon, you'll never be able to vote again. They also admitted that it would hurt a lot of poor white folks, and basically said that's okay because it'll hurt more black folks. That's literally a matter of record. So that's what we're dealing with. When I'm governor, we will make sure that we are doing voter registration, so that we have automatic voter registration that's permanent, portable across our state. Everybody who's in a jail will start there. We will make sure that they have the opportunity to vote. Why? Because if you're in a jail, you are presumed to be innocent. Because you have not been tried yet. Then you go to prison. And so everybody who's awaiting trial in a jail will have the opportunity to vote. And that's how we'll get started. And as we're doing that, we'll see where the conversation goes. You've got to build consensus. But what you understand, we'll start having that conversation so other people understand that the more connected inmates are to society, and that's why I'm so proud of that company, Pigeonly, co-founded by that Morgan State grad, because when you do what our prisons do and charge people like $1 an hour, $1 a minute to call home, they call home less. They get more disconnected, they become more isolated, they become more dependent on the gang for everything, and they go home more dangerous. But when they spend more time in prison talking to family members, envisioning what life will be like when they leave, they come back better. And we have to shift our mindset from throughout sort of what's, if you will, cheapest to what's most effective. And we see it in our prisons where they say, oh, well, it's cheaper if we charge the families as much as possible for their loved one to call home, because it creates a new sort of revenue and it cuts the costs. But actually, no, it creates more costs, because the people come back more dangerous. Thank you very much. I want to close on one thought here. Our states matter. This election matters. Your jobs, our jobs, all of us, but I'm saying everybody here who's not a candidate, is to make sure that all of our neighbors understand that. That this election is bigger than the so-called presidential years. Why? Because we pass more laws at the state level than we do at the federal level. Congress, in 2 years, may pass 250 laws. The Do-Nothing Congress passed 1,000. We're now at a quarter of the productivity of the Do-Nothing Congress, 10% of those for the renaming of post offices, and the minting of commemorative coins. Congress is not doing much. But the Koch brothers are investing in making sure Larry Hogan gets a second term. Why? Because they're banking on his second term, and that's what I'm running against. Larry Hogan wants to redistrict our state to make it easier for the Koch brothers to have their way with our state. Larry Hogan, if you're wondering what his second term will look like, I'll just offer up Chris Christie. Everybody thought he was kind of bipartisan and a nice guy that first term, and then his second term, my God. And if you have any doubts about that, just go look up the guy Larry Hogan's been campaigning for in the Republican primary for governor in Pennsylvania, and you'll understand who his friends are. It's the Tea Party-backed, most right-wing conservative person in that primary. Now, Larry Hogan right now understands that he wants to be elected again, and he has a Democratic supermajority, so he's just got to keep his mouth shut, be silent Larry until he gets in. Secret of politics, best way to get reelected is to do nothing. He's trying to do as much of nothing as he possibly can. But look at who his friends are. Look at who he's campaigning for. Look at who's backing him. Look at the damage he can do with redistricting, and understand we've got to get our neighbors off the sidelines. 2010, Maryland defied national trends. We had 125,000 more Democrats showed up than showed up in 2014. We had the lowest Democratic turnout in 2014 since 1942. Doesn't matter how popular he is, doesn't matter how much money he raised, if Marylanders won't vote for him, he can't win. And if we turn out our neighbors, there's no way he can win. So please start the conversation now. Anything here, touch tonight, talk about it. But more than anything, could you get home, make it clear to folks that Larry Hogan's only in office because we didn't show up last time. When we show up, he's out, and we can start getting back to moving forward again and making sure that our government is firmly on the side of the working people, the striving people, and working families and striving families of our state. Thank you, and God bless.